Thank you very much for joining our session, which is getting the most out of Microsoft Teams. What we're hoping to cover today is basically an overview of how Microsoft Teams can be used. So this is going to cover off overview of Microsoft Teams and then how it can be used for the various different services that it offers. What we're going to do primarily is we're going to just jump into a demonstration and we're going to show you a live example of exactly how Microsoft Teams works and how it should be used in a hybrid working environment. So the first thing is really, what is Microsoft Teams? Lots of organizations are just using Microsoft Teams for basically Teams meetings. There's a huge amount that Microsoft Teams is able to deliver, and that includes basically being able to collaborate, being able to reduce or replace internal emails. It's got huge amounts of power, and a lot of the organizations that we work with are barely scraping the surface of what it's able to do. So what you'll see here is how a Microsoft team is built up. So there's a lot of different components within Microsoft Teams. The first thing that we've got when we create a Microsoft team is that it creates a SharePoint site. So there's a lot of functionality that's available as part of SharePoint that's also available as part of Microsoft Teams. So it's important to know as we create a Microsoft team, it starts to create all these different components to us. So the first piece is a SharePoint site, and that gives us lots of goodness like being able to store files and collaborate and share files externally. The other thing that it creates in the back end is a Microsoft 365 group. Now, a Microsoft 365 group is like a legacy Microsoft team. They tried to create a version of Teams where you could have a shared mailbox and a calendar and some other functionality, but over time that's become obsolete. It is useful though, because it means that group can be used for things like permissions. So lots of organizations will use Microsoft Teams groups so that they can manage their permissions in Intune and manage security across the board. So it is quite interesting to know that you could use these groups for other things other than just Microsoft Teams access. We also create a distribution list. So every time we create a team, there is a distribution list that can be created. So for example, if you're looking to create a finance team, you could use that finance team for a distribution list as well. So you can start to think about reducing duplication within the organization. And then finally, we have the actual Microsoft team functionality. So this is what then provides us the ability to use Teams and everything that I'm going to jump into today. I want to set the scene with when we should use some of the tools. So for example, here we have 3 tools that are available to us. We're going to be focusing on Microsoft Teams today. But when we're working with organization and positioning these tools, we generally position SharePoint as a company-wide tool. So you can think of SharePoint as your intranet where you can go look for news, policies, and perhaps each department would also have a publishing site where they can share information with the rest of the organization. So SharePoint's great as a generally open to all staff. And when you position it within your company, position it as the intranet where you can go look for that information. We also then have a product called OneDrive. OneDrive generally is used for personal documentation. So you might be working on a draft file that doesn't need to be shared with the rest of the organization. So we can use the OneDrive functionality for that. We can then do some ad hoc sharing. So it might be useful to share a folder with a supplier or a customer, or you might be doing a one-to-one with a member of staff. And then finally, we've got Microsoft Teams. So when we're talking about utilizing Microsoft Teams more within organizations, we're able to use Microsoft Teams as a collaboration tool. So this is where multiple people can start to work and collaborate in a modern way. Departments can start to utilize the platform to share files, collaborate, chat, and join meetings together. And we can also obviously set up group calls with users that we're working with within the organization. Now, typically how we see organizations deploy Microsoft Teams, there's a wide variety in terms of the types of teams that organizations can deploy. The first one that we have is a departmental team. So it's really common now, especially when we're working in this hybrid way of working, that organizations want to try and create a centralized communication point where we can basically collaborate. If I'm working from home and the rest of my team's in the office, It's no good for the person working from home to be able to overhear conversations. So email isn't really a great solution for this kind of thing. Microsoft Teams can be a fantastic way of basically trying to create that departmental area, and it becomes the one-stop shop for everyone in the organization trying to look for files, collaborate, reduce and replace internal emails, and also host their regular departmental meetings. We also can create teams for project and ad hoc scenarios. So for example, if your organization was rolling out a new piece of software, that would involve multiple departments like IT and finance and other stakeholders that would be included on the project. And we can create a Microsoft team so everybody can collaborate in that area and in that space to share ideas and talk about plans and such. Then finally, we have two types of teams which are more social based. We have a company-wide team. So we use our company-wide team really effectively internally. This is where we look to do things like praise people. We connect it to our SharePoint intranet so we can share news and such. And then we've also got social and initiatives teams. So I've seen an organization that worked really well based in London. They had someone there that was interested in cycling to work, and they wanted to share the best times to travel in, the best routes. So they created a cycle to work social team. And then everybody who was interested in that started to join and share ideas and tips and best practices. So those social teams can be really useful within organizations as well. I'm going to jump into Microsoft Teams, and I'm going to show you some examples of the best way to use Teams and how to get the most out of it. So I've just jumped over into my Teams interface just here, and you'll see that down the left-hand side, we have a number of different tabs that are available to us. So you can see that what I'm able to do with this first tab here is I have one called Chat. Now what the chat is able to do is I can start one-to-one communications with people within the organization. So if I just jump into a chat here, I can search for myself just as a test here, and then I can jump into the chat and say, hello, how are you doing? So chat's great for sort of informal communications where we just need to kind of get someone's attention, see if we can jump on a call. So can we jump on a quick call? What I see a lot of organizations doing is they start to evolve from chats and they start to add in other people within the organization. So I might loop in Jade onto this chat here, and I might also loop in perhaps Steve as well onto the conversation. And effectively what we're doing is we've now created a group of people within the chat. Now, this starts off working really well. So if the finance team decide, right, this chat group's going to be really useful, it's very similar to WhatsApp, then as I start to come in here and sort of say, hello, where is invoice 123 up to? We'll now see that everybody in this chat group would get the notification. Where it starts to fall down is if people start to have conversations over the top of one another. So if someone else is saying, actually, where is invoice 124 up to? Then very quickly it can be very frustrating for the other people in the group, because the disadvantage of chat is that you're going to get those notifications constantly. So every single time you put a message within this chat, it's going to start to basically ping all of the people within the group. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here for people. And you'll see here that because I'm a member of this chat, I'm going to get every single notification. So if you've ever been part of a WhatsApp group where you're constantly getting pinged all the time, it's very frustrating, and you start to switch off from the notifications. The other disadvantage of a chat is if I come into here and hit reply, and I can say I'm working on this. By the time someone tries to do a couple of replies to that thread, we actually lose which conversation it relates to. So if you're trying to use this to replace internal emails and start to move towards Microsoft Teams as the way of working, this doesn't actually work that well, because it's very easy to start getting confused about which conversation relates to what. So chat has its place, but we tend to find it's better for that informal communication rather than more formal communications and trying to replace emails. We actually even put a policy in with most organizations where Teams chat is informal and almost like an off-the-record conversation. So it's possible to create retention policies where the Teams chat's deleted more frequently. So for example, we delete our Teams chat every 90 days. So it's an off-the-record conversation. If we jump over into Teams, I want to show you the benefit of utilizing Microsoft Teams. So you can see within our organization, we've got a few different teams that I mentioned. We've got a one for all of our customer related projects. I'm a member of a management team. I'm also a member of the sales and marketing team. So as I said, it's really a great idea to look at creating departmentally based teams. As I jump into this one here, I've created this one for now called Demo Finance. Now I'll show you the major benefit that we get if we were to include everybody in the Microsoft team rather than the chat as per my example. What we're able to do within here is basically start to create conversations. So if I use my example before of trying to chase invoice 1, 2, 3, 4, what this will now allow me to do is I can tag a conversation to somebody within the team. So I can say, Steve, where is this up to, please? And we've now created a thread, and it's much easier if we're trying to have multiple conversations. I'm just going to create one about invoice 1, 2, 3, and then I could tag somebody else within the organization in here, like Dougie, and say, where is this up to? So this is much more similar to when we're trying to look at Outlook, where we have subjects and we have the ability then to have threaded conversations underneath them. So as I start to utilize this process, I'm able to kind of jump into the invoice 1, 2, 3, 4. I can click on reply, and I can start then to kind of follow up with this conversation. I say, I'm currently working on this. So this basically means that everyone who's included within the thread would be tagged. So unlike the chat group that I mentioned earlier on, where everybody's getting the notifications constantly, only the people who's tagged in this thread. So as it stands now, just Steve and I would be getting the messages and the notifications related to this. If I jump into the invoice thread with Dougie, only Dougie would be getting those notifications along with myself. So the major advantage straight away is that we're not constantly badgering people unless they've been tagged. And we're also then able to distinctly see which thread relates to which thread. I'm also able to create on the left-hand side different channels. So by default, everybody in the Microsoft team would have access to the general channel. So if I'm in my finance team and I'm looking to include everybody, just as soon as I create that team, everyone would be able to see the general tab and start to see the conversations that happen within here. We also have the ability down the left-hand side to be able to create different channels. So you can see here that I have a directors channel, I have an external channel, and I've got a few others. Now there's different types of channels that can be created. So if I just jump into here and click on add channel, you'll see that we have 3 different types that we can create. The first one is a standard channel, which means that everybody has access to it within the team. The second one is a private team, a private channel, and the third one is a shared channel. So jumping in here on the left-hand side, you'll see that I've created a number of standard channels like invoices. And the advantage of this is that although everybody can see those conversations and chats, it's a way of breaking out the communication and making them simpler to find. So if we're always talking about invoices, rather than overwhelming the general channel with the same posts, I can jump into the invoice channel and I can use it almost like folders to find things easier later on. If it's a really large team, when you've got 15 or 20 people, or maybe 100 people, this general channel, you don't want to have so many conversations, it becomes really difficult to find what you're looking for. So this channels allows you to break down the communication so that later on you can easily find what you're looking for. The other 2 types of channels is this private channel. So within the finance team, you might be wanting to create a section that's restricted to just a subset of people within the finance team. So I've got one here that's called the managers channel. So there may be a couple of financial leads that should have access to this information. And that's where we've got things like appraisal information in here. So you can give only a subset of people within finance access to the managers channel, and then we can have private conversations. So it means you don't have to go and create loads of different teams for different scenarios. We can try and create one finance team and then use the private channel to break those communications up. Another good use case within the finance team is we have the payroll one. And the payroll one, again, could be used for sharing payroll information that's sensitive to others across the organization. So that's what the private channels are for. The next type of channel is the new type of channel that's recently been added. Now, this type of channel is called a shared channel. And what the shared channel allows you to do is create a channel that exists in multiple areas. Now, I'll use my live teams as an example here. Within our organization, we have a marketing team, and only sales and marketing have access to this team currently. But there's a whole host of activities that marketing like to share outside of the team. So for example, today's event, they might want to share a LinkedIn post about it. They might want to share a news post about it later on. So we've created this shared channel between sales and marketing and our customers team, which everybody has access to. So it's a way that was a challenge previously, where if you've got, for example, the finance team and finance work really closely with HR, one of the common concerns previously was we don't want to include HR in all of our finance team. We just need an area where we can collaborate. So that shared channel allows us to have conversations across multiple teams. And we've done this with organizations that have multiple business units. We've done it with organizations that are looking to create across like the HR and the finance example. So it's a really powerful feature that allows us to start to share those channels across multiple areas and save us, reduce the amount of teams that we need within the organization. The other features that we have within channels, we have the ability within the section to use files. So the files section basically allows us to look at moving away from a traditional file server. So it's really common with the projects that we're delivering here at Valto, is that we're looking to move away from traditional file servers, network drives, and maybe even third-party cloud systems like Dropbox, and we create a centralized place. So again, using my finance example, you'll almost certainly have a finance network drive that only the finance team have access to. And this file section can then be used to migrate and upload those files within the system. So when you're looking at trying to get the most out of Microsoft Teams and get the value from the platform, you can start to consider, can you start to move away from legacy things like legacy file systems and start to move into this way of working? Now, I can access this using the Files tab. As you can see here, I'm able to see all of the files and the folders within the system. However, this isn't a very familiar view of what people would be familiar with working with. So what we're able to use is we've got this option at the very top here, which is called Sync. If I select the Sync option, that creates a folder on my machine called, and in my case, this one's called Valto. And I can see that I have access to the demo finance files, which I synced earlier on. So what I'm able to do is I'm able to access those files in a very similar view to what we have within Microsoft, within a file server. Once we do that sync option, that starts to then give us some additional functionality. So you can see here that next to some of these icons, I've got a cloud icon. But if you wanted to take some of these files offline, you can right click on those options and you can choose always keep on this device. So this means that you can take copies of your files so that when you're working on a train, you'll still have access to the files that you need to work on. And then that means you can access them, make changes to them. And what will happen automatically is the OneDrive syncing tool will synchronize those changes back into Microsoft Teams for you as soon as you get an internet connection. So utilizing this Files tab is really kind of critical to starting to get the most out of Microsoft Teams. We're trying to create within this finance team the one-stop shop in which everybody can access everything they need. So I'm now able to get rid of my internal emails, and I'm also able to start accessing my files from within this section. We also have a Wiki tab. So the wiki is commonly used for creating an area for new starters and people within the finance team to be able to share knowledge, best practices. So within this wiki here, you can see I've got some examples of how I would update Sage, how I can access Sage Payroll, and it's very easy for me if I need to create a new page, and I can add in a new starter process, and I can start to drop the content in here. So it's a very simple place in which the wiki can be included, and then to start sharing that knowledge across the team. Another great tool that we have is this one called Finance Planner. So this is a tool called Planner, and it can be created within all of the teams that you have access to. Now, the idea of Planner is it's a shared space that you can start to create the tasks. So if you imagine in the traditional office environment, you might have a whiteboard on the wall that's got all the key tasks that people are working on. What we're able to do from within this list is start to create tasks that we're going to be working on. So I can say, for example, invoice procedure update. I can set a due date to it, and then I can assign that task to someone within the team. Once the task's been created, we can jump into that task and we can start to add some additional information to it. So a priority, we can add a checklist. So write the document, distribute. So we have that capability within here. We do have the ability to put comments in so people can see where it's up to, but ultimately it becomes that shared departmental task list. If this was a departmental team, we would also be able to basically create, if this was a project team, you might be using Planner to share all of the Planner tasks across the organization and who's doing what. And because it's very, very like Trello, you can also move those tasks across the different individuals, across the different buckets. So Planner is really useful. Planner can also be used in conjunction with a tool called Microsoft To Do. So Microsoft To Do, if anybody's used this platform before, is, and I'm sorry, I can't zoom this in, but what Microsoft To Do is basically able to do is it has this task here called Assign to Me. So if you have any tasks assigned to you across multiple teams, the Assign to Me will show you all of your tasks that you currently have outstanding and what you'd be working on. So this would show, for example, the task that I've just assigned to Rob, the invoice procedure update. If you're also in the habit of flagging emails within Outlook, you can use the flagged email section, and you can also create your own individual tasks. So if you're working on tasks that aren't shared with the team, and the idea of that is once you have those tasks, you can right click on an individual task and choose Add to My Day. And what that gives you then is a list of all the tasks that you're planning to work on in the day. So these tools can all be combined across 365. We can have a centralized task management tool here where I can see what my team's working on, whether it's for a department or a project. But To Do brings all of that together where I'm then able to right click on tasks that are from emails, from my own to-do list, but also from Planner. And I can then mark those tasks off as complete as I've hit each one and then move on to the next task that I have. So Planner is a really great way of being able to get more out of Microsoft Teams because it helps your department work more effectively. Now, we do have the ability to add lots of other applications. So third parties have created applications that are available for Microsoft 365. So you can see there's hundreds of these. Generally, as part of what we would recommend when you're looking to roll out Microsoft Teams is to kind of perhaps limit some of these applications. It opens a lot of possibilities for shadow IT and backdoor access to systems that you perhaps aren't ready to support. So generally, as part of any project we would look to do, we would limit how many of these applications are available. But Microsoft provide a load of great apps. So you can see as I jump into this, one of the questions that I can see that was asked was, are wikis planning to change over into OneNote in the future? I don't know that there's a specific plan or timeline available for that at the moment, but it is definitely interesting to know that we can create a OneNote within here called Finance as an example. And Finance is a bit like the wiki that I demonstrated earlier on, but perhaps on steroids. So the OneNote functionality is very similar in the fact that I can create notes and sections, but I can also then add a lot more rich content within here. So it's worth considering around OneNote or Wiki, which one's best. Within Valto, we don't actually use the Wiki a huge amount. We've moved over to using the OneNote. We can also look at pinning other types of things in here. So if there's an Excel spreadsheet that's really commonly used within the team, we're able to choose the Excel option. And you'll see that I can then look within the finance team and I can find an Excel file that I'd like to share with everybody. And that becomes available as a tab in this top section here. So we have the easy capabilities to make this tab section across the top the one-stop shop for people to go find their applications within that team. So I mentioned around that's kind of like a departmental team. We do have a kind of a good example here of a social team. So within Valto, I mentioned that we use this to share any news and praise for people within the organization. So you can see that people share events that they might be looking to go to. Somebody shared the event for today. We've got praise for someone in the member of staff. So you can consider using the social team as a way of sharing good news stories and praising people across the organization. It's a great place to do that. So that's kind of the Teams tab that we have available. Obviously, there's a huge amount of functionality, but one thing I recommend to organizations is to start to think about not trying to move away from the chat because of the disadvantages I mentioned with constantly getting pinged, even if you're not involved with the thread, and also not being able to have that continuity of threads and being able to find things. And the Teams functionality provides a lot more in terms of being able to break those conversations down. Because when I'm creating any of these threads, I'm selecting this A option and giving it a subject. It does mean that if later on when I'm searching for invoice 1234, when I search for this here, you'll see that I can easily find that and I can jump straight to that conversation and see where it's up to. So the subjects and the threads mean that it's very easy to find what you're looking for later on. Often what we'd also do is I'd recommend organizations think about their team structure before they just go straight into it. We work with lots of organizations that have just started with teams and grown it organically, and they've got themselves into a position which we call team sprawl. So team sprawl basically is where we have too many teams and people are no longer sure where they should be looking for the information. Within Valto, we generally look to have a handful of teams, and when we're rolling this out with other organizations, we do try to keep it to a handful of teams and a handful of channels. If you're a member of 10, 20 teams, it's going to become a nightmare on a day-to-day basis to find what you're looking for. And yes, the conversations are the same as posts, so just a little bit of terminology change there as to one of the questions that's dropped in. So yeah, if anyone has any questions around that, then I'll show them. I'll be able to answer your questions and talk you through that. But I wanted to show you a few other things that we have available to us as well on the left-hand side. So the first one here is the calendar. So the calendar basically is a link to your Outlook calendar. There's not a huge amount that's different from Outlook, to be honest, within this section. But what we can do in the top right-hand corner is there's a couple of hidden features. So dependent on your licenses, you may have the ability for live events or webinars. Today, we're hosting a live event. So if you're interested in how we've got this one-way communication where you're able to drop questions and answers in, and I'm able to present, this is what the live event functionality. The webinar functionality is very, very similar. But what it enables us to do basically is create a webinar, but you're also able to create a web page associated with the webinar so people can come in and subscribe to it and do that kind of thing. So the webinar's a little bit like Eventbrite, I guess, that it allows you to create a theme. You can fill in your presenter bios, you can set up a registration of who's joining, capture their details. We're currently using Eventbrite for this because it's tied into a lot of our marketing activities and such. But if you're an organization that's looking to get started with creating webinars, it's a great hidden piece of functionality that's available in this top right-hand section. We also have a option here called calls. So it's possible within your organization to basically roll this out as a phone system. So Microsoft have a solution called Business Voice, and for roughly £12 per user per month, there is lots of third-party providers out there that can provide different things, but the call functionality allows me to receive a DDI phone number, which you can see here. And that allows me then to send and receive calls across different organizations. So we don't have a phone system. We've set this up within Microsoft Teams. We have phone numbers in different countries. We have a US number, a UK phone number, and then we have set up different call rules and call forwarding. So that system allows us to basically create, for example, when someone phones our main line number, that will then go through a call routing for press 1 for sales, press 2 for accounts, that kind of thing. There's some quite cool functionality available within the phone system. So as an individual user, I can jump into the settings just here. And I've got this call section down on the bottom left-hand side. So what the call section allows me to do is define if somebody calls me and I don't pick it up after 20 seconds, that'll go to a call answering service, for example. I can also set this configure voicemail. So if my calls do go to my voicemail, this basically has a nice feature down here that says if I've configured an Outlook auto reply, this will read the message back to that individual. So I generally have quite a descriptive out of office reply, so that if somebody then phones up and says, receives my voicemail, let's say I'm out of the office and I'm returning to work on the 25th of March. So it's quite a cool feature. I'd say for a lot of organizations now, there's no need to have a traditional phone system. It's perhaps overkill. And you can the £12 per user per month license includes domestic calls, so UK landlines and UK mobile phone numbers. If you're calling out to different countries, you can have like a credit where you're able to have either an international plan with a set number of minutes, or we're also able to set like a pay-as-you-go type system up where you buy some credits and people utilize those as they need to. So that's the call section. Down the left-hand side, you'll notice that we've got this one here that's called intranet. So we can actually also include internal applications that you may have developed. So one of these that we have is called Viva Connections. So what Viva Connections allows you to do is basically plug into your intranet. So you can see we have this standard landing page, but what we're also able to do is jump straight into Valto's live intranet within here. So it's a way of being able to, without leaving Teams, I can access my company intranet and I can start to see all of my company news and stuff. Now, Viva Connections is free. It's very easy to set up. It's just running a few PowerShell scripts from Microsoft, and then that'll plug the Viva Connections over on the left-hand side. You can customize it a little bit like we have, so we can just have this button that says intranet. It's a great way then of being able to bring that into the view. We also have another new nice app which we've been using a lot here at Valto, which is this one called Updates. So this is a new app that's available from Microsoft as part of Teams. And what it allows us to do is basically share different updates that are happening across the organization. Now we can set up templates of how we would like to use these. For example, you can see how I've got this one for daily update, weekly update, or project update. If I jump into the project progress, I can set this up with a certain individual. So I'll send this to Jay as an example. The project that I'm working on is the Microsoft Teams Go Live. It's currently about 75% and hit an issue with ... Is there anything blocking my progress? No, yes. And do you need additional support? So you can see Microsoft are starting to try and give us a place where we can provide updates and drop those into obviously the updates tool, but also start to send them to your manager and drop them in the project threads as well. I can also see if I click on request an update, and then I can hit new request. Again, I can pick from a template if I want to, but I'm basically able to create a template and go through that process. So we're using the updates feature, as a way within Valto so that people can provide updates on the projects that they're working on. We follow an agile methodology for some of the projects, so we get some daily and weekly updates within here. But it's quite a cool tool that's available as part of Microsoft Teams. A couple of the other features that we have available within here, Viva Insights. So we'll probably look to do a dedicated Viva session at some point in the future. But Viva Insights basically is a way to make sure that you're working, you're not overwhelming yourself and you're kind of protecting your work-life balance. So within here, for example, it encourages us to send praise. So we try to send as much praise as we can within the organization where we can drop in these. We can actually also have a praise reminder. So within this section in here, you can get it to send you a weekly reminder to praise people, for example. We have the sections within here that allows us to basically stay connected. So you can see as this loads up in just a second, it'll encourage us to reach out to people that we perhaps haven't reached out to in a while. Emails that you may have forgotten or just contacts that you may not have updated. We can also protect time within Viva Insights. So we can use this to make sure that you've got focus time and it will suggest times to focus. Obviously, my calendar's quite busy at the moment, so it's not giving me much time for that. But within the focus time, this would automatically disable Microsoft Teams and put you in a focus mode so you can actually work on day-to-day activities. We also, I won't go through absolutely every single one, but as we said, we can also plug in some different third-party applications that are available within Microsoft Teams as well. So if you're working with other providers, then you're able to drop these in and make those available as applications just here. So I can see that there's a lot of questions, so we'll probably look to kind of wrap the session up from this side, and then I can focus on some of the questions that have come through. So if anybody has any questions around what I've been through so far, please drop them in. But I'm also just going to run through and answer any of the questions that we have. So one of the questions was, how do we add the intranet into Microsoft Teams? So we talked about using Viva connections for that. We also talked around, someone's made the suggestion here that we have the ability to include Microsoft Teams games. So there's a new feature as part of Microsoft Teams that allows you to play games. So perhaps after a company meeting, you'll be able to play those games, and there's like icebreakers in there, Minesweeper. There's lots of different things that are good to end a company-wide meeting. A few questions that we've got from around some of the functionality of Teams. So someone has asked, can posts be moved between shared channels? So unfortunately, as it stands now, there's no functionality that allows us to move threads and conversations. That is a feature that's been requested for and has been in hand for quite some time. As it stands at the moment, we have to use a third-party product to move things between channels. When we create a new conversation, though, we do have the ability to use this post in multiple channels. So perhaps if you're looking to try and get an initial post shared out with a lot of teams, this is the one that we're able to use just here. We've also have, can a team be changed in color based upon some form of criteria, i.e. a live status for an emergency response team? So the color can't be changed. The only way that we can do that is really by trying to look at changing the icon of the team. There's no easy way. If you had a scenario though where you were looking to try and create an emergency response, one of the features that we have available within the chat is that we can hit this exclamation mark and we have this urgent option. So that is a good use case for when we use the chat, and we can get this moving forward then. We have another question, which is, can you explain the pricing for the Teams phone system? So if you have Business Premium, we then have a plan available to us called Business Voice. It might be best to reach out after this webinar, because we could run through and show you the different licenses and the different SKUs that are available. But the the business voice functionality basically as an add-on for Microsoft 365 Business. And what that allows you to do is you can plug on one of these different add-ons. Now this one, Teams Phone with Call-in plan, is the £11.30 per user per month. This allows you to set up a fully fledged phone system. It includes domestic call-in, so UK or whichever country you're in, minutes for mobiles and landlines. There are options for Microsoft Teams Phone Standard, which is only £6, but this doesn't include any calling. The aim of this plan is it's more related to organizations who want to perhaps integrate with their existing system, or they would perhaps like to integrate with a third-party product where they might already have the phone system. So another question that's come through is, can a training requirement hub be used and what apps are available? So this is perhaps, there is a tool within Microsoft Teams, which is called Viva Learning. Viva Learning is quite basic at the moment in the fact that it's more about Microsoft presenting courses that are available to you. So you can add a whole host of courses that Microsoft have created for using different platforms and different products. But what it's lacking at the moment is the ability to create your own custom courses and manage it from that perspective. Where you're looking to create a training hub, SharePoint might be a better option for that. So this is an example of SharePoint as an intranet tool. Within SharePoint, it's very easy to create different types of training products. We've created an example site here of a training portal. This includes things like links to external systems. It includes upcoming training courses, documents that we want to share, and then like a video section as well. So it's a very effective way of being able to share like centralize all of your internal training assets. Microsoft have also created something on the lookbook as well, which is called the Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways, which you can set up for free. And that gives you a training portal. But again, it's focused on leveraging some of the training courses that Microsoft provide. We've also created some custom add-ons for this, where we have a training matrix, which tracks different people within the organization, the certificates they have and when they expire, and will remind people about that. And we've also created a skills matrix, which shows all of the different individuals within an organization and where they're currently up to on a skills basis for the different skills that you might have within your organization. So I think we've got to the end of the questions. We've got another question about international call-in. So that's an add-on that's available for the voice. And if you can reach out to me after this webinar at hugh@valto.co.uk, I'll send you over the full data sheet, which covers the pricing for international call-in. So has anyone got any final questions before we look to wrap up the webinar for today? Okay, great. So we do have another webinar that's coming up that's aimed specifically at non-profits. So on Wednesday, the 19th of April, we'll be looking to host a webinar about what's new in Microsoft 365 for non-profits. We're also looking to host a couple of new webinars. One will be around Copilot and the features and functions that can provide. And we'll also be covering off how Copilot can integrate with Microsoft Teams. So there's some interesting features that are coming as part of that, which, for example, would scan a meeting and automatically create the minutes and the actions for you on that. So thank you very much for everybody for joining. Sorry for the hiccup at the beginning, and I hope to see you on a webinar soon. Thank you all.